Hello, folks. Jeremy Bruce with Saga Media, and I am here with Mark Caskey of Steel Nation. Mark, thank you for coming on the show today. First thing, tell us about Steel Nation. What is it? What do you do? And how did you get started?
Thanks, Jeremy, for having me. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. We know each other through the oil and gas and energy world. I started Steel Nation. We're energy services company where we build steel buildings for so many different types: compression buildings, transmission, auxiliary, blast rated buildings, offices, PDC, MCC buildings. The list goes on and on. But I've been in steel buildings most of my life. Previously, I was in the coal industry building coal prep plants. In 2008, Obama ran. In 2007, he actually ran on shutting down all the coal plants all through coal mines all through America. That was the start of the decline of coal. I had to do something, so I started seeing all these oil and gas people coming, usually from Oklahoma, Texas, driving the proverbial white trucks like we do, and what's going on here. And I got to see the very first well, which is in Mount Pleasant Township, Washington County, out by Hickory, Pennsylvania. A couple of my beer drinking buddies from Louisiana actually took me out there and showed me the Renz well, RENZ. It was first drilled in 2006. I got to see it right around 2007. First horizontally fracked well. We've known about the geologists have known about the Marcellus shale for hundreds of years, but the technology had gotten better on how can you access this and go down 8,000 feet and go sideways another 20,000 feet or whatever it is. You can go a mile even now. So I got to see the first well, and as I was looking at the site, and there's really no buildings on it. They're temporary buildings. They might be trailers and modular things that are gone. And I got to talking to the guys out there, and they're like, "Well, we're building the first compressor building right up the valley up the street. Why don't you go see Jimmy Ray and Bobby there working on it right now?" So I went up and saw the very first compressor station. It's called Johnson, actually owned by Mark West now. And went to see that, and I was just shocked at how loud it was. I pulled right up to the site. All the doors were open. There were 6 compressors just rambling, rocking and rolling. And I was, I can do this. I can build these steel buildings better, cheaper, quieter, safer, the whole thing. So that's what really started my movement from coal, working for other people, into Steel Nation. So I started it in June of '08. If you remember, '08 was the biggest recession we've had,
Yes.
probably in my lifetime. Well, I'm a lot older than you, but maybe the second. The one in the early '80s was pretty bad. The demise of steel. So I got to witness the demise of steel, which my ancestors had worked in, and now here I am, witnessing the demise of coal, which brings us up to the present time. There's a lot of the fossil fuel haters want to shut us down now, and that'll be 3 strikes, and I'm not going to let that happen.
So, can you tell because we're definitely going to dive into that subject, but for our viewers who might not know what a compression station is and what your steel buildings do on a
Yep.
layman's term basis, can you explain briefly to our viewers that are watching what that is, and what your building does for that specific part of the well site?
Sure. If you look at Washington County, Pennsylvania is the second largest in volume natural gas in the whole Marcellus Shale, only after Susquehanna County. We have some advantages here. We have very wet gas. Okay, Susquehanna is dry gas. You can go right to market into the Boston, the New York, the whole metro areas up and down the East Coast. So if you go into Washington County, sometimes you'll see from I-70 or I-79, you'll see the tips of some wellheads that are being put in, the actual drill rigs that are put in. These are usually on farms, a minimum of say 100 acres, but a lot of these farms are 200-300 acres, so they're spread out. But you could see distantly, a quarter mile over here or a mile over that way. So a compressor station is usually built right in the middle of, let's just pick a number, 5, 10 wells. It doesn't really matter what the number is. It matters more what the volume is. And if you think about what a compressor station is doing, it's really performing a huge vacuum, just like your vacuum in home home or your shop vac in the garage, that you're actually forming pressure on all these wells, because they're all wells are tied together to come into a compressor station. So that's the number one thing we do, is form this vacuum. Okay, number one, it helps the gas come out of the fracked rock. Okay, so what fracking means is you do explosives 8,000 feet underground very safely, and it actually fissures and explodes the rock. That vacuum helps pull that gas out. What also compressor stations do is, the very first thing that's done is the water is taken off. So the moisture, I shouldn't say water, but the ethanes, the propanes, the butanes, all of the different the liquid natural gases are pulled off there. It's dried, the dehydration units it goes through. And then there's a lot of cooling that goes on too. It's just like anything else. If you're going to transport gas, you should cool it and get the atoms to shrink. That way you can fit a lot more gas into that 24, 36, 48-inch pipeline that you may be sending, to Philadelphia or wherever it's going to go. It may be going back to Texas, Louisiana. So that's mainly what a compressor station does. Like I said before, the compressor buildings, we'll have auxiliary buildings, office buildings, blast-resistant buildings. There might be 5 or 6 type of buildings in one site.
Okay.
But that's what compression does more than anything.
Interesting, and that's good to know. And our viewers now have a overview, because someone would have been like, "What the hell's a compression station?"
Right, exactly.
So you build a lot of the steel buildings around their offices and whatnot that need to be on the well sites. Now,
actually, usually not on the well sites.
Yeah, they're adjacent and down the right. Yep.
Yep. So they could be compressor stations.
Yep.
They could be transmission stations. Transmission stations is where all these compressor stations go. So it's much bigger. These are massive, massive turbine buildings and those type of things. In the way on the like Mark West has a lot of plants. If you look at Houston, Pennsylvania, or Harmon Creek out by the airport, these are processing plants where you're even getting into more fractionization of the gas that's coming out, mostly dealing with liquids.
Yes.
The money is really in the liquids. Methane is what we get at our houses, our businesses, keep the heat on. We can use it in our stoves and things like that. So not just compression. Compression feeds processing plants, transmission stations, and then oftentimes industry too. If we're going straight to a steel mill, using immense amounts of gas, down in the Mon Valley or whatever it may be.
And so Steel Nation so there's really diversification there for building out on various sites, reasons for buildings and whatnot. Are you specifically in the energy business, or can you build a steel warehouse or do you guys get business through that channel as well? Or commercial properties, storage.
We do, but the whole commercial industry is a lot different from oil and gas. It's very risky. We do it all the time. We'll do 2 or 3 big buildings a year. A lot of these warehousing things, the Amazons that you're seeing out by the airport and those type of things. Commercial construction is a lot different from oil and gas. For one thing, oil and gas pays the bills.
Yes.
We've never have not been getting paid, but commercial, you hear all the horror stories. So we don't dance in that arena too often, Jeremy. But sometimes the projects, people come directly to us and, you guys are good. We want to learn. Can you do this for us? Yeah, we'll do it for you. We did a retail project up here in Cranberry Township called Pet Suites last year. And it was about 30,000 square foot building. It was more retail. It was done by a developer. So the developer has done 50 of these pet suites. It's kind of like a doggy daycare type of thing. And they've done 50 of them in the last 5 years all across America. So we'll do things like that where we know there's repeat work in it. We know how to read the prints, the art. It's a very, very nice building. It's all based on steel buildings. But steel buildings, it's been in my blood for a long time. For whatever reason, I just kind of fell into it, 30 years ago. And it's amazing. After we're talking, you're going to drive home and you're going to see steel buildings. How many steel buildings? It's just hundreds, just on 79.
Mm-hmm. It's a great name too. Boy, it's catchy. So it's Steel Nation. It's just that's something that just comes to you at the middle of the night, or was that a name that you had picked out far before you really got? Because it's you find sometimes people overthink what they want to call
Right.
themselves in business,
Right.
and it's usually the ones that it just makes sense.
Right.
So, I mean, it's Steel, Pittsburgh Steelers, but Nation. You know, on a Google search, you probably are already on first page. You have to be
Yeah.
with a name like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was part of, the Steeler Nation. Being
Yes.
a Steeler fan since I was born, basically. Parents and things like that. I did write Dan Rooney, rest in peace, Dan, years ago, a letter explaining that I was going to use it. The hypocycloids, the three emblems that you see on the Steelers, one side of their helmet.
Yes.
And I got approval from Mr. Rooney, and he wished me luck. And he even commented. I sent him the logo, and my colors are purple. So our enemy is our enemy is the Baltimore Ravens. So Mr. Rooney said, just please try not to use black and gold. And I said, no, I've already got the Ravens. No love for the Ravens, but
Yes.
just to separate the two.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Just about 5 years ago, we went to trademark and register the name Steel Nation. Because you find other companies that are trying to use it. We send them, nasty letters and things like that. And usually it's not anything to do with the steel building, so it's not a big thing. I get this letter, and overnight FedEx, and it's from the NFL. And when we went to register, that you put out letters automatically. They go to anything that has any resemblance to the name Steel Nation. So Steeler Nation came up somewhere. Okay. The NFL writes me this dirty letter. You can't use these symbols because it's copyright protected by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I just started laughing, So I had the guy's number, so I called him, said, hey, do you know who owns the Pittsburgh Steelers logo? He goes, the NFL owns it. I said, no, the NFL doesn't own it. The Steelers don't even own it. It was lent to the Steelers. Used to have black. They had no emblem at all until I believe
I think just numbers too.
just numbers, right?
At one point, yeah.
Right. So the company that was involved with U.S. Steel, but really the United States Steel and Recycling Association of America, this big long name,
right.
actually owned it and trademarked it in the 50s, and they lent it to Art Rooney Sr. To use on the Steelers. Well, the Steelers never gained control, and that logo has been through 3 different owners. So I had to tell this poor guy from the NFL to, cool off there, buddy.
Yeah.
You guys don't own the logo.
Well,
I might own it more than you own it, So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Interesting that
Yeah.
even the NFL would track you down, though. That's who you wonder who's watching that, and looking at that.
Right.
That's a similar, but total apples to oranges. I knew of a guy who had a really small bar in Pittsburgh, and it was like a country name. I can't think of it off top, but there was the real. And it was based off of a movie or whatnot, but there was an actual bar in Las Vegas that did the same. And I'm like, how did they find you? It's a little bar in Carrick.
Right.
And yeah, he found him. And
Yep.
there was really no correlation or threatening to this Las Vegas big nightclub.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was another one. Like, you wonder how these kind of groups or whatnot find you. That's an interesting story.
Yeah.
So then going from, into that is you're heavily involved in obviously the energy business. You said coal background, obviously natural gas. I've worked in all of them myself, and they're great industries. So let's go back to 2008 then. So you come out of the coal industry, and that's even then was probably going into that was still a tough run. Coal started kind of even before that dying down, or at least being forced out. Where 2008 comes, you come up with this idea. Then what got you also now so heavily involved with being affiliated in like coalitions and that, and you can speak upon the coalition that you are recently affiliated with.
Yes.
And tell us about that group.
So even in 2008, I got to get back to 1980. My entire family worked for J&L along the river in the South Side, and Clareton Works, Edgar Thompson.
Yes.
We're on my dad's side. We're all from Lithuania. From my mom's side, we're all Irish. we came here to work in the mills. There's no doubt about it. In the 1910s, 1920s, that's where the jobs were. Pittsburgh, we got to remember, Pittsburgh was a lot different than it is now. It was dirty. It was hell with a lid off, if you remember that. I'm a little bit older than you, Jeremy, but I remember coming through those Fort Pitt tunnels and just black soot and things like that. Well, that was making steel, and we built America. We really did. We had more Fortune 500 companies in Pittsburgh in the 60s and 70s than any other city, including New York City and L.A. And that was quite. Now we're down to 3 or 4. It's. I was reading something this morning. The deindustrialization of America. We started seeing that happening back in the 70s. We can't be making all this stuff. We've got to farm it out to third world countries. And India and Korea, Japan at the time. Definitely not a third world country now. But we gave all those mills away in the early 80s. We shut them down, and it's a fraction of what. Still a lot of specialty steel making being done right now. Interesting enough, Cleveland Cliffs, who's trying to buy U.S. steel right now, Cleveland Cliffs is not American owned. So we're not going to have any. If this does go through, we're not going to have any American ownership of these big steel companies anymore, which is kind of scary, depending considering that's what built America.
It is, and I recall being young and driving through the South Side portion where now is the South Side Works and the Steelers practice facility. But I remember it being this just very long vacant. I mean, it was a massive steel mill. It ran that whole distance. That was at least 5 miles almost, maybe 10.
Right.
And then it just being all raised and down in Homestead. And it's you really did start seeing the deindustrialization of, and they talk of, you hear the experts say, it was because of the pollution, and they'd rather that pollution be over in China or Japan and other areas and whatnot. But it really, it did change the landscape. I mean, Pittsburgh was, you recall, really bad shape in the 80s.
Right.
I mean, all those people that left. I remember Charlotte, North Carolina was the place the Pittsburghers were leaving in the 80s and 90s. Because
I was born in Charlotte, but my dad and mom and dad were from Pittsburgh and moved back in 6th grade because my dad was in the industry and he could, he was in the welding supply business, and Charlotte was doing good. Carolinas, Virginia, but certainly in the 70s, we moved back in '73. The mills were booming, and he had to be there. That's where all his customers were. But it's interesting when I hear about the pollution, and things like that, and thank God, Pittsburgh is cleaned up, and I can remember, in the early '70s, late '60s, waking up, and the first thing you do is crack your, even on a February, cld day, crack your window open, see if you could smell that rotten egg smell, that sulfur smell. Oh, it's going to be one of those days, and you'd look out your window, and it's all smoggy and overcast, kind of like it was this morning with just being hot, right? Mm-hmm. And but I think a lot of it had to do with labor, cost of labor. Guys were making, they're feeding families here in Pittsburgh, and the unions were strong then. And, I think a lot of it was breaking unions too. We could talk about this for hours upon hours. So it was pollution, it was labor rates, those type of things. And, moving to a third world country, we're still seeing that today with offshore banking and those types of things where what is made in America. Look at the textile industry up in New Hampshire and Boston and things like that. There is no such thing anymore. Your American flag is made in Bangladesh, right?
Or
China, right?
I don't know how many American flags I see made in China, and it's almost just like, what is this?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, you can't make an American flag here,
right?
I mean, geez, oh man. So then we get into, we what happened in the 80s and 90s, and then, as coal started and your transformation from coal into Steel Nation, and we can really dive into 2008 and where it came from. What was there a turning point when you started to say, I need to get involved outside of just my businesses and my industries? Because and you can speak on your alliance, again, is called
the American Oil and Gas Alliance.
Okay. And
so let me talk about American Oil.
Yep.
And then I'm going to jump back to 08
absolutely.
if I could. And I know we're all over the board.
Yeah, it's
but,
okay.
A lot of stuff to talk about. Thank you. A gentleman named John Gallo came to me back in April and said, "You don't know me from Adam, but I'm in the oil and gas industry. I've been a pipeliner since I was 17 years old. I'm tired of this fight against our industry. I've made a living. John's probably mid to late 30s now. I've got 3 kids. I make 6 figures a year in the oil and gas industry, and I'm just tired of the people that are trying to tear us down, that don't work for a living, that they're paid protesting and those types of things." Boy, he caught my attention right away. Again, I already have 2 strikes. The steel industry's gone, the coal industry's gone. You're not going to kill my oil and gas industry, and I'm going to do everything I can to fight against it. So let's have lunch. We met at South Point that day, All-Star Grill, and I really like the way John thinks. He's for a young man. It's like that new song that you hear about the rich men north of Richmond. He's a young man with an old soul. He really is, and he's very bright, and he can spit off facts and figures. And I said, yeah, let's do this thing. So we started it back in April. We have Brian Lynn and Sophia Gonzalez and Matt Leeper. There's really 5 of us right now, and other people getting on board that are thinking about joining our organization too. We have a couple hundred members already. It's cheap. It's $60 a year to join. Corporate's like 300, less than 300 actually. But it is what we're doing. There's a lot of organizations, and I think I've told you this before. You after 10 o'clock at night or even 9 o'clock at night, you're watching Fox News and most of the paid programming, all this stuff, and you see the API, the American Petroleum Institute, and it's a nice couple with a little kid walking through a field with a rainbow, and how clean natural gas is. Well, yeah. That's what it's all about. But are they really going to say what we want to say? We want to fight back. The narrative has been now, we just celebrated our 15-year anniversary. The narrative even in 2008 was, the global warming. We need to shut down fossil fuels. We got to go to electric vehicles and all this. I've been hearing about it all my life. Well, that's not true. All my life back in the 70s, they told me we were going to have an ice age, and we were all preparing for this ice age that was coming. Well, they had to change the name global warming to climate change, right, for that obvious reason. It wasn't the ice age. So let's pick the next opposite thing, right? I'm getting way ahead of myself. But we're a small grassroots organization. We're people that work in the field. We all have jobs in oil and gas, and we want to fight for the common man.
Absolutely.
We're not the American Petroleum Institute, and there's now a lot of these alphabet soup groups that claim to fight for oil and gas, and a lot of them are owned by ExxonMobil and those type of things. Let's face it, they've got to play this ESG game, or they don't want to rattle too many cages. We're not too concerned about that. We want to fight back. When we see these untruths in the news every day, last week when Florida got the hurricane, thankfully not one death from that hurricane. I have a house in Hurricane on the other side of where it hit. Every time we have, either really cold weather or really hot weather or hurricanes or forest fires, it's those damn oil and gas fossil fuel people that are causing all this. And there could be nothing but further from the truth. The number of hurricanes, if you graph it, have been declining in the last 30 years. And the Industrial Revolution was in the 1800s. And if you really graph it from the Industrial Revolution, it's still falling. So that's what the American Oil and Gas Alliance is all about, is really pushing back on the truth. I often tell John and I talk about it, we don't want to be on Fox News. We want to be on CNN and MSNBC. We can preach to the choir all we want. We need to get out there and debate. We're actually, interesting enough, we're going to have a debate in Washington County because there's diametrically opposed candidates running in oil and gas. So I want to get all 4 candidates. There's only 3 commissioners that are selected, and have a debate, and we're putting that together for late October, right before the election.
Good.
November. So it's important, hundreds of millions that we've received from Act 13, which is what the oil and gas pay for counties. And Washington County, we're always number 1. This past year it was $10 million. What would we do? What would Washington County do without that $10 million just evaporating? all the investments that have been made in hotels, restaurant, infrastructure, paving companies, concrete company, Steel Nation ourselves. In 15 years, we've done $334 million. Okay, it's not huge, but our best year, 40 million. Our average year, 35 million. A lot of jobs,
That was
a
good.
lot of money,
Jobs.
taxes. Oh my gosh. Of what we have done in revenue, probably a third of that. We think probably 100 million just in taxes alone, federal, state, local, school, and all, real estate and everything else. So, what happens when you just shut a business down there? What happens when you shut a business down is what happened to Braddock, what happened to the South Side, what happened to Hayes, and everywhere else. So you just work your way from Pittsburgh down through the Mon Valley, Donora, Charleroi. It's interesting tonight. Tonight we're attending an Americans for Prosperity event. They have a watch party. It's a 6-minute video that just appears on social media, and it's called "The Towns That Washington D.C. Forgot." And we're talking. There's filming in Fredericktown. Old mining towns. There's Waynesburg, PA. Huge mines right in Waynesburg. Waynesburg's a shell of itself. And this is all Western Pennsylvania, Northern West Virginia, Eastern Ohio people. We're Appalachians, and we've been fighting this fight for centuries now. On West Virginia, always one of the poorest. I don't know why. South Carolina and West Virginia. The South Carolina being on the tip of Appalachia and then West Virginia right below us. I often say Pittsburgh's the Paris of Appalachia, and we are.
Absolutely. So the alliance. Before we jump back to '08, what is on a quick version of what is the say like the next 2 years out look like, 5-year outlook of what you're trying to accomplish?
Two things: education and legislation. So
Good.
We've met with all the Pennsylvania legislators, both sides of the aisle, not all of them, but quite a few in person to talk to them, to invite them to events and things like that. On the education side, we just did a weekend at the Titusville Community Weekend. Okay, Titusville is where the Drake Well is. Okay, we have I think John had mentioned to you that we have a 2-year contract to do any type of fielding. We could do interviews. We could have congressmen, people up there, right at the Drake Well. The Drake Well was the very first well in the world. Okay, not only produced about a half a barrel a day. It wasn't a great find, but still there was a lot. Back in the day, it was Pennsylvania gold. It really was, and that area that they don't really do. We don't really do a lot of natural gas in that area because the geography is not conducive for it. But we have a history of energy between coal, natural gas. Shallow well natural gas has been going on since the 1800s here. You've seen the old pictures of they would hollow out logs and make pipelines out of logs. You talk about safety.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've come a long way. So,
Right.
so the alliance wants to do, mainly education. You want to get in front of the opposition because I believe the education could assist in that manner as well. Because again, getting on, Newsmax or Fox News or whatnot is not going to be as effective.
Right.
You want to be able to have these debates, but do it in a manner, I guess, to really educate, so you can maybe start to bring some of that opposition to see what the value is now. Outside of that, so we get back to 2008 and kind of moving forward here with natural gas. I mean, it really took off, obviously, in our area because I'm involved as well, and it has benefited and flourished for us. But there has been a big pushback and whatnot. From 2008 to today, like where do you see natural gas and, outside of the fight, realistically right now? Do you have an outlook as to where our industry is going to be in 10 years, or is it because we're at a pivotal moment where this could go one way or the other? I don't know that it's going to really flatline.
What we're hearing from the left is by 2050, and from the Biden administration, that every car, every truck, every tank worldwide is going to be electric. Right? It's impossible, just scientifically impossible to do that. We're not against alternative energies. I'm all for I'm all for wind, solar, if it works. Okay, it's not working. Okay, people fail to realize that some of this solar stuff is not that new. They were trying solar back in the day. Hydro, the Dutch were trying to use windmills in the 1600s, in the 1700s. There's not enough power coming out. Hydro is way a lot more powerful because of the Hoover dams, those
Sure.
types of things, no doubt. I'm all for alternative energy. I said we need to do it all. Okay,
Absolutely.
it's not going to happen. 2050 is a pipe dream. By 2050, in 90 years from now, from when we're all gone, we don't know what the energy is going to be. Is it going to be hydrogen? It could be atomic. It could be something that we don't even know yet, right? That's how, you figure we've only been using electricity 160 years, not even that, 150 years. So that's not that long. Natural gas we've been using a lot longer than that because prehistoric man actually were able to tap into natural gas, light it, and use it for warmth. We know that. Where do I think it's going to be? I think it continues to increase. The amount of natural gas has never dropped off in the last 15 years of this I call it the Marcellus miracle, and I don't see it dropping off. I see solar, I see wind, I see hydro. Even if you want to throw biomass into the equation, and biomass is the biggest sin of them all. You can burn forest down, and that'll be biomass. That's what it is the burning down of trees. How could that be renewable? Landfills, that's considered renewable. Well, you need more trash to make gas, right? So how's that renewable? Our natural gas has been renewing for billions of years, percolating down, and it'll continue to percolate forever.
We haven't got into, really got into the Utica and all the shales below, the layers below it.
Devonian shale.
Yeah, yep.
Right. But people forget that there's natural gas everywhere. It's just the reason the Marcellus and Utica shale are so prevalent right now, in addition to the Permian, the Barnett in Texas, it's easier to get to. It really is. There's shales in Michigan that are kind of Devonian, but they're shallower. There's tons of shallow wells. All through Appalachia, you'll see old wells. And, it was the whole problem with itself is plugging up the old wells. Mm-hmm. But where I see it as, I see natural gas to continue to climb. And even the Energy Administration, they don't call Biden a liar or the left liars, but they're like, they're not going to slow down on natural gas anytime soon. We need it to power America.
So do you feel then, because one of the kind of holdups is obviously the midstream transmission through the pipelines. And obviously there's been pipelines that are constantly being canceled, the Keystone XL pipeline, the MVP pipeline from Pennsylvania all the way down, I believe, as far as North Carolina. It seems like that's getting passed through, but then also, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was multiple ones coming from out here west to fuel all the way up in New York, and those have been canceled. What do you feel, honest opinion, where the likelihood of getting those, especially going northeast, because that's where that could really change the game here in our region to send gas up and sell and keep it flowing and additional development? Do you feel that we're ever going to get our gas up to New York and the New England states?
Not with the leftist governors that they have right now, starting with Cuomo in New York. Let's remember, the Marcellus Shale is based on a town in Marcellus, New York. Okay, you go to the town. There's no stop sign. There's stop signs, a few. There's no stoplights. Okay, and you go to the nearest creek, and you see the creek is bubbling. Okay, and the left uses against that. They say that the creek is bubbling natural gas. And you can, I can smell a little bit. It's naturally bubbling. Okay. It's nothing to do with fracturing, and they use it in movies against fossil fuelers. And I could spend another hour on that. But Governor Cuomo, he shut off 12, 13 years ago. All the farmers on the Binghamton, New York, on the north side of the border, they signed leases with a couple, mainly with Chesapeake Energy. These farmers got a nice $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, nice pocket change, and then signed long-term contracts. Okay. Well, the long-term contracts, no drilling was ever done. That's where the money is. Yes. That they could have been making. So, and it's sad. I was just up there last 2 weeks ago, Susquehanna County. all the farmers on the south side, Pennsylvania, driving new John Deeres, new F-250s, new Rams. On the north side, they're cash rich and poor as hell.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It's a shame. The MVP let's talk about. So the Mountain Valley Pipeline is what it's called. Well, it's EQT that developed this. We built all three of those massive compressor stations 3+ years ago. They've been sitting there idle for 3+ years. And in fact, because it's a Pittsburgh company that's doing that, the three stations are named Bradshaw, Harris, and Stallworth. Okay, those are the first three. The one that you're talking about that will eventually be in North Carolina, it's not approved yet, is called Lambert. Lambert was the fourth of the four Super Bowl winners. But we built that 3 years ago, and it's been stuck in court. It's costed EQM probably $500 million to fight against it. And this is all coming out of the Virginia court, the 4th District, and it's all judges that were appointed by Obama and Clinton before him, and even going back to Jimmy Carter. So it's a political, straight politics all the way. Do I think we'll ever get to New England? The old saying, when you're in New England, you can't get there from here, right? Mm-hmm. You ask for directions. The people up there are getting tired of burning biomass. Yes. Old tires and trees and those type of things. They would love to have natural gas. It's one of the coldest places in America is New England, right? And there's very little natural gas. There are some major lines in there. Algonquin pipeline did get up there, during the Trump administration and open up some things. It's turning people on to how easy natural gas, how cheap it is.
Yes.
You're going to really get propane delivered twice a year at these outrageous rates, or are you going to do natural gas piped in at 1/10 of the cost? It's a no-brainer.
Yes.
It'll eventually get there.
Just take time. Now, a couple more questions. Then one more about export then. Do you feel, is this another pretty big hurdle? Because we've heard about exporting natural gas, and Europe needed it last year and whatnot. Quickly, do you feel there is a real possibility that we can be a real big exporter, even more than we already are, over to Europe and whatnot, in regards to liquefied natural gas, taking it out? Because that also seems to be a challenge. If we got that pipeline up to New England to these certain ports on the coast, this could make this easier, and that just continually seems to be stalled.
I'm a little older than you, and I can remember 1973, 74, the Arab embargo. Energy it controls the earth. When Saudi Arabia and all those surrounding Kuwait, and that they quit shipping natural gas to America. My dad had to wait certain days based on his license plate to fill up his car, and then you had to sit in a line, for 20 minutes or 20 cars ahead of you to get and fill in gas. It's political. Energy is so political, which is the problem, right? Let's remember. It all goes back to Karl Marx. In 1850, Karl Marx said, tear down all industry and make it government controlled. Okay? Russia did that. How successful they were of doing it, who knows? Okay? But to this day, where did Germany, when Germany's solar, and I can't pronounce the German, it's energy wind, W-I-N-D-E, however you pronounce that, it failed. Okay? So two years ago, they had no electricity. They had, there was no wind, and the wind goes up and down, and they forgot we're going to have slow years of wind, just like the ocean, the different currents and things like that. Now, who do they have to buy gas off of? Vladimir Putin, okay? Who now is, and Karl Marx was wrong. It went to the state, and then it went to these oligarchs. So it's a mess over there. So he can invade Ukraine, and then it's all interconnected, right? So there's a lot of people that want to keep energy here in America. Okay, if you start exporting it, then we won't have enough here, sure. And we still, even at $4 gas or $5 diesel, we're still a hell of a lot cheaper. I was in Aruba on vacation this summer, and it was $7 a gallon. Thanks. If you did the liter connection, mm-hmm. So almost double. But everywhere else in the world, in all of Europe, we still have the cheapest gas. Let's not kid ourselves, But in 3 years of the Biden administration, our gas has doubled internally. But so the big argument is, well, we won't have enough here. There's enough natural gas to last us. That was the big thing back in the 70s, is we only have so many years left of key energy left, and it's garbage. The natural gas and petroleum is constantly remaking itself.
Yes.
1,000 miles into the earth or whatever it is. So, politically, you let's try to keep it behind in our own borders. But politically, what better than us to serve Europe, to serve Asia, to serve Russia, right? And let's face it, and you hear this all the time, we have the technologies already there to do it.
Absolutely.
We have technologies to run a pipeline between, like you just said, from Boston to Britain, into France and to our friends, right? We have the technologies to do that today. That way, you're not shipping on rail car boats that could have problems. You're in a pipeline under the ocean.
That would be a game changer.
Oh,
absolutely. If we ever see that get done, who knows? Because now you're dealing with international waters, and how does that all go? But it's been done. You have pipelines, you have oil, but gas and oil, under the water and under the ground and whatnot. So that would really be a game changer. Last question is back to Steel Nation. Where is the company? What is your company vision for the next 5 years or whatnot? Because I follow your company and the growth, and it seems like you're really growing right now. Is this growth outside of Appalachia? Where do you see the company in the next 5 to 10 years?
So 2 new markets that came up. Geographically, we have now built in 37 states of the 48. We won't go to Alaska, and we won't go to Hawaii. It's just too hard to get there. Can't get there from here. We are doing work in 36, 37 states. We have 2 new markets that were untouched just 2 years ago. Okay, and this was really made, I think, about the slowdown that we experienced during the 2 COVID years, the shutdown years. We had to expand into other markets. So one is well site compression. You rarely will see well site compressors on the actual site, and when you do see them, they're usually rumbling and tumbling and rock and roll with no buildings on it. So we've come up with this new program. We have a driller. It's Coterra. That's up in north. Yep. That we're doing 20. We did 13 last year, 25 this year, and 27 next year. For the further out, and they've got hundreds and hundreds of wells. In the old day, you went down to Dallas Pike, and you'd see all these drillers putting these little $799 garage ports, on them, and with these vinyl plastic things to try to stop the sound. Well, those vinyl plastic things catch fire and all this other stuff. So we've come up with a really nice steel building package for 3 different types of compressors to do that. So that's upstream, that's upstream. And then on the other end, we're working for utilities. The utilities our biggest client right now is Duke Energy on that side, right around Cincinnati, and also down in the Piedmont coming up. But in Cincinnati, we're in our 5th big plant, redoing everything in that plant. These plants were built in the early 1900s, and I kid you not, some of them were wooden pipelines, old trees and things like that. So those 2 markets are great for us. We open up the conversation about building in commercial. We've kind of gotten away from doing commercial, although we'll still do it. We're really going to concentrate on what brought us to the dance. The
bread and butter, oil and gas.
Exactly.
Well, Mark, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate your time today. I wish we had 3 more hours because we could go all day, but it's been a pleasure. Mark Caskey of Steel Nation. We're going to link your company information and your American Oil and Gas Alliance.
Yes.
Also in all of our YouTube channels, all of our podcasts. And Mark, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
Appreciate it, buddy.